Hey everyone, Rick Husey with Broadband Deployment News. Welcome. The FCC has opened up a little over 2,700 locations that were just defaulted on in the RDOF and CAFII auctions, and they're going to make that available for other federal broadband programs, including BEAD. Be right back. Hello again. Thanks for joining me. Rick Husey here with Broadband Deployment News. So this is something that I think this is the first time this has happened. We've had defaults with RDOF and CAFII, but I believe those were all prior to the announcements of funding for BEAD. So this was an announcement just yesterday. You see here, released on February 28th. Where there are two providers, one in Virginia and one in Alabama. So if you are an internet service provider in those areas, or if you are obviously a state broadband office in Alabama or Virginia, this would be of great interest to you, because these will be some locations that were originally considered committed because of RDOF and CAFII that now are going to be considered open. The FCC is making that known. So unfortunately for the states, the funding that they would have already been promised through BEAD was calculated with these locations being considered served. So that's the downside. But these are locations that you should be able to apply BEAD funding to, because they're not committed now, according to the FCC. So we'll take a quick look at the public notice. I'm not going to go through all of this, but I did link to the notice in the description of this video if you want to check it all out. But here I'm just going to cover a couple of highlights. So you see here, Wireline Competition Bureau announces certain RDOF and CAFII auction census blocks groups are eligible for other federal or other funding programs. And obviously that I don't see why that wouldn't include BEAD. It could also include ARPA, something like that, if a state wants to move ahead using some of their capital project funds for that, or something, the state and local fiscal recovery funds that they're getting through ARPA or have gotten through ARPA. They could apply that if they've not already committed that to specific locations. So by this public notice, the Wireline Competition Bureau announces that BARConnects, that's the provider in Virginia, and North Alabama Electric Cooperative have notified the Commission that they will not fulfill their commitment to offer voice and broadband service to certain census block groups within their Rural Digital Opportunity Fund and/or Connect America Fund Phase 2 auction supported service areas. These providers will be subject to penalties as described below for the CBGs where they are defaulting. We notify stakeholders that the census blocks are eligible for funding from other federal and state funding programs subject to the rules of the other programs, furthering our responsibility to coordinate with other agencies to maximize the deployment of high-quality broadband service across the United States. Here in the notes, BARConnects was authorized to receive $4.9 million approximately in CAFII auction support over 10 years to serve 1,734 locations in Virginia, and a little over $6 million in RDOF support over 10 years to serve 1,962 locations in Virginia. NAEC was authorized to receive $8.48 million in RDOF support over 10 years to serve 4,376 locations. BARConnects is defaulting on 1,032 of those locations in its CAF Phase 2 auction and 810 in its RDOF service areas. And NAEC is defaulting on 879 locations in its RDOF service areas. So if I remember, I added that up, and it was like 2,721 locations. There's just over 2,700 locations that will now be available in these areas in Virginia and in Alabama. BARConnects and NAEC remain committed to deploying service to the remaining CBGs in their respective RDOF and CAF Phase 2 auction-supported areas. And it's interesting to note that this is the kind of thing that, again, hasn't happened, where they sent in a letter to the FCC and said, hey, we're not going to be able to do this in these particular areas. So it's not like they got to the end of the program and then just the default was there. They have certain milestones they have to reach through everywhere that they've committed, but they did send in a letter in advance. So in Appendix A, we provide a list of all the CAF Phase 2 auction and RDOF eligible census blocks contained within the census block groups that the carriers will not serve. In addition, we will also update, and this is important, we will also update the broadband funding map to remove the census blocks from the support recipient service areas. So again, these would have shown as should have shown, I guess, as committed on the FCC map, but now will not. So below we provide a limited waiver of the Commission's non-compliance rules to adjust support to reflect that these areas will not be served. BARConnects and NAEC otherwise remain subject to RDOF and CAF Phase 2 auction non-compliance measures for failure to meet the terms and conditions of support, including support recovery for all unserved locations at the end of the deployment term. So basically, as I read through this, FCC is going to stop providing support for these particular locations, or the amount of dollars that would be allocated to these particular locations. And then when it's all done, they're going to look at it and see what penalties will be, will be placed on these companies based on what they were not able to do considering their initial commitment, I believe is the way it reads. So while BARConnects and NAEC notified the Commission that they will not serve the identified census blocks, they are not withdrawing from RDOF and or the CAF Phase 2 auction programs. Those programs support program rules do not provide for partial withdrawals from the program. So that's important. The rules don't provide for that, for a company to say, hey, we can't do these areas. But I think the waiver that the FCC is talking about here would allow them to do this in this particular case. So the Commission takes compliance with the terms and conditions of the CAF 2 auction and RDOF program seriously and imposes non-compliance measures if the requirements are not met. BARConnects and NAEC remain subject to the program rules, including the applicable non-compliance measures, for the duration of the support of the term except as explained below, and they remain committed to serve the eligible census blocks within the remaining census block groups in their supported service areas with the voice and broadband service meeting program requirements. On our own motion, we waive in part sections, and that mentions these sections here, the Commission's rules for census blocks identified in Appendix A, and instruct USAC to stop paying support for identified census blocks. And I did not look at those sections. You're welcome to do that if you want to dive into that really deep. We find good cause to stop payments for the identified census blocks for the remainder of the support term with no opportunity to cure, rather than withhold and recover future support for the census blocks in accordance with the non-compliance tiers and support recovery process. So again, as I'm saying, they're just going to withhold the support for these areas now, and then later, at the end of all of this, determine what penalties there are as far as recovering any funds that are required. I think that was it. So there you go. So again, I linked to this not too long document if you want to check it out. And what I find most interesting here again is that this is after, again, BEAD funds have been determined, it's been allocated basically, or determined which each state's going to get. The states have been trying to figure out, okay, which areas are unserved and underserved, which areas have commitments already that are going to be considered served if they're not already, if there's no broadband there, we have to count those as served because there's other federal money that's going to be building out broadband there. Well, these areas now will not have broadband through RDOF and CAF 2, so they have to look at those now, have to determine, how they're going to fund those. Again, these are locations that they don't automatically just get more money now to fund these. Like I say, the original number of unserved locations that they had were based on these locations being served as part of RDOF and CAF 2. So they've got to figure that out and how that's going to be done. So it does provide some opportunities here to get this out of the way now, rather than, the good news is we didn't have to wait 5 or 10 years to figure out this wasn't going to happen. So the states can do something now, considering the monies that they have from, again, maybe some other federal programs like ARPA that are still available, USDA Reconnect, if that could apply in some of these areas, and certainly BEAD. They can take action now, and it will be interesting to see if more of this happens with RDOF, for example. And just because a lot has changed in the time since the auction, most importantly, inflation. Interest rates, those kinds of things have really increased the cost of what it would cost to build out broadband. So that may be one of the reasons. I don't know why these two companies defaulted in these particular areas, but be interesting to see if any more companies do this now that the FCC has seen this happen and other folks have seen this happen. Whether other RDOF and CAF 2 recipients will look at doing this in certain areas, and there's kind of a precedent for it now. Thanks for joining me today. If you learned something new, or if this was helpful, if you'll give me a like on the video, I'd appreciate it. Just do a thumbs up there, and then click down on the subscribe button to subscribe. Ring the bell to be notified when I am live. I appreciate you joining me today, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.